graph related to the linear motion. Here you have very simple types of graphs. They are displacement time graphs and velocity time graph. Other than that, you don't need to learn about the acceleration time graph like things because they are in the advanced level syllabus. So first one, I will explain about the displacement time graph. This displacement time graph can be defined as the graph that illustrates how the displacement of an object varies with time are known as displacement time graph. And the other thing is these graphs are plotted by marking the time on the x-axis and the displacement on the y-axis. Remember that always time should be marked on the x-axis and the displacement should be on the y-axis. This is the very basic things. You can draw the graph according to your scale. There is no any limitation for that. You can create your own scale to draw this displacement time graph. The most important factor is the gradient of this graph. Gradient of the displacement time graph indicates the velocity. So there may be zero velocity, increase in velocity, decrease in velocity part in your displacement time graph, or 1 or 2 or all of the parts may be in your displacement time graph. It depends on the question. And the other thing is you can calculate the gradient by using this given formula. You can see this formula indicates the gradient equals difference between y coordinates divided by difference between x coordinates. So you can easily understand that we have indicated the displacement on y-axis. So difference between y coordinates means displacement, difference in displacement. And the other thing is difference between x coordinates means difference between time. So displacement divided by time, here we have calculated in the graph, can be used to find the velocity. It's very easy. And the other thing is this displacement time graph can be used to find the variation of displacement according to the time. That is the simple theory part regarding displacement time graph. So we can move to the next type of graph, that is velocity time graph. The graph that indicates the variation of velocity with time is known as velocity time graph. Here the time is plotted on the x-axis while the velocity is plotted on the y-axis. This is similar to displacement time graph but different in physical quantities. You need to understand that x-axis is same as to the displacement time graph but y-axis is different here. We are using y-axis to indicate the velocity, variation of velocity. And there are two more factors that need to know about the velocity time graph. They are the gradient and the area under the velocity time graph. So first one I will explain about the gradient. Gradient of the velocity time graph can be used to find the acceleration or deceleration. This is very similar to previous part. So gradient is the difference between velocity or difference between y-axis divided by difference between x-axis. So you can calculate the gradient. This gradient is equal to the acceleration or deceleration. You can see this formula that is used to calculate the gradient and then acceleration. There may be positive gradient or negative gradient. So if it is a positive gradient, that is acceleration. If it is a negative gradient, you can see that is equal to deceleration. That is it. The next thing that can be obtained from the velocity time graph is the displacement. That is it. This can be obtained. That means the displacement of the object can be obtained by the area under the velocity time graph. So remember that the displacement is equal to the area under the velocity time graph. So there may be different shapes of areas, maybe a triangle or a square or trapezium. And so far we have learned about the displacement time graph and velocity time graph. So between these two different graphs there are similarities and dissimilarities. So you need to understand the differences and similarity. And the other thing is there is only one factor can be found from the displacement time graph, but from velocity time graph you can find the acceleration and as well as displacement. So more things can be learned about the velocity time graph. And finally we come to the gravitational acceleration. The next topic is the gravitational acceleration. You can simply identify this according to the theory. Gravitational force. And when we are talking about a free falling object, there is a force acting on that free falling object as well. So because of that gravitational force, there is an acceleration acting on that object. This acceleration is known as the gravitational acceleration. Actually this force is exerted by the earth, so that is called gravitational force. Due to this force the objects have an acceleration, so that is called gravitational acceleration. The gravitational acceleration at sea level is about 9.8 meters per squared second. We can round off this value to 10 meters per squared second. So we are using the 10 meters per squared second value, not the 9.8 meters per squared second.